Hello, everybody. I am so sorry. I was not looking at the time. It has been quite the morning, but I'm getting set up and we are here. And I'm so sorry if you've been waiting. I feel like I've been doing really good lately with being on time for stuff. So, it was kind of that time for me to screw up and not be looking at the time. But I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm super excited to bring on today's guest, so we're going to get right to that since I'm behind. All right, let's bring her on. Okay, fingers crossed. We already got 25 people on. Hello, hello. Oh, hello.
Hey there.
I am so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We've actually got super weird weather here right now, so I apologize that I'm kind of in the dark. It's really
Yeah.
loud in our trailer when it rains, so I had to come
Ah.
inside and kind of make shift.
Yeah, it's been a week. I actually just posted. I realized that I was behind on a deadline for the this stuff, the Sweet Roll Vivid that came out for premiere.
Mm-hmm.
But we had all three of our animals. We had our cat had to get teeth pulled this week. Our other dog got stung by a yellow jacket, so she's in a cone. Everybody's getting Zyrtec because everybody just so happens to be allergic to Alabama weather. So it's just one of those weeks.
Life happens. It's all good. We make do with what we can. I had all my lights set up in the RV and everything, and then
Yeah.
it started getting heavier rain, and like when you're in like a tin can, it
Yeah.
comes down. Like husband and I have to yell to talk to each other.
Oh, yeah. So that would be fun, yelling at the camera.
Yeah, I don't think you want to hear that.
Well, I'm just so glad that you're here and that it worked out that you were able to come on because this has been for this specific one, it's been a little while in the making. I mean, I think I reached out to you, it was before your last trip, right? To see if you wanted to come on,
Yeah, I've been out of the country a lot lately, so
which is
and
exciting.
longer, and then I head back out. But yeah, I'm here for now.
Yeah. So tell me, remind everybody, where was the last trip that you took and what was that like?
The last trip I took was Arctic, Norway and Arctic.
Mm.
Because of COVID pushing everything back, this year in 2022, I'll have hit all 7 continents. So
Wow.
yeah, Antarctic Circle and Arctic Circle. So been doing a lot of traveling, but yeah, I was just in Norway a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, my husband would be super jealous because he has decided that our next trip, he wants to see the Northern Lights.
Mm,
So he wants to do the Arctic. So
yes.
he's excited about that. So that'll happen at some point, one of these days.
Yeah. Northern Lights are amazing. I feel like everybody has to see them. You just have to dress warm.
Yes. Well, and that was how I felt the last trip that we took was to see the redwoods in California. Because that's how I felt about it. I was like, I just have to see them. Like I have to see them for myself. And that's how he feels about the Northern Lights. So that will be next step for sure. So let's do just a quick introduction. So anyone who's on here who has not met you or who doesn't follow you on Instagram, if you just want to give a quick intro of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Krista Ann from Explore with Knitsy, and I'm basically a nomadic knitter. My husband and I live in a 20-foot travel trailer, and we travel the country and with international excursions. I am lucky enough to knit for the film and TV industry and fashion and things like that. And I can do it from anywhere. And so that was after 20 years in Los Angeles, we sort of sold most of what we owned, jumped in the RV, and I've been able to just work from the road and do all sorts of stuff just from the road, just sort of virtually. It's all just mailing stuff in and things like that. But and so yeah, now we're back on the road after a little bit of a hiatus from COVID, and loving it.
That's awesome. So let's take it all the way back to the beginning. And just so anyone who's watching, if you have questions, please be sure to put them in the question box. That is on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's the little speech bubble with the question mark in it. Because sometimes the comments, they'll scroll past and I may miss a comment or a question. So please be sure to put them there. But let's go all the way back. And when did you learn how to knit? And do you also crochet?
So I learned how to knit probably close to 20 years ago. I had been dating my now husband, my boyfriend at the time, and a girlfriend of mine was like, I want to learn how to knit, just like randomly. And so we, like 3 Saturdays in a row, we went to a class down in Hollywood and learned how to knit. And I just sort of took to it. And at the time I was in the music industry, and so I had just gotten out of that. I was just getting out of that and going back to college. And knitting sort of helped me survive college. It helped keep me focused in class, and was knitting on the bus because parking was stupid expensive, and it was like hard to find parking. And so I just took the bus and I knit, and it sort of just helped me survive that, and never expected it to become what it was, but sort of how I learned. And then it's just sort of evolved over the years into teaching and designing, and, you know, sort of how that whole progression happens when you sort of become obsessed with a project.
And so you only knit. Do you crochet at all? I think you do, right? Those cobweb sleeves.
Yes, I do crochet.
Yeah, okay, cool. And so how long was it that you started knitting before you picked up crochet?
You know, that's a really good question, and I don't fully remember when. I think I started to crochet to like embellish like edges on my knits and things like that, and then sort of started getting into learning the stitches, and so I don't know how long. It's probably been at least half the time. I am by no means as good of a crocheter as I am knitter. I'm definitely solid knitter who can crochet.
Yes.
And you know, one of the things that I can't do with crochet that I wish I could is I can look at a knit, and, you know, sort of almost anything knit, and I can figure out what the stitches are, and I can't do that with crochet. And I'm on that, trying to be able to look at a piece and go, okay, that's this stitch and that's this stitch, and be able to sort of it. And I can't do that yet. Super great. So I'm a knitter who can crochet.
And what did you go to school for? And what did that journey look like for you?
Oh, that's a whole nother life journey.
Of course it is. We have an hour though.
Yeah, I went to school to become an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
And I years, and it just wasn't for me. I love teaching. I won't get into the politics of LA Unified School Districts and all of that, but just found that I loved teaching, but that wasn't really the best place for me. So now I teach knitting, which I love so much more. Yeah, that was a whole nother part of me. I've had like 3 lives. I was a music publicist, I was a teacher, and a knitter. So they're all like completely different, but.
And we talked about this a little bit, and I actually wanted to ask you, did you grow up in LA? Like, where did you grow up?
No, I grew up in Arizona.
Okay. So not too far, though.
Say it again?
I said not too far, though. It's not like you grew up over on the East Coast or anything. So you were still kind of over that direction.
Yeah.
And when did you move to LA?
So my senior year of high school, my dad got a job in Southern California, and they didn't want to move me in the middle of my senior year. I was very involved in marching band. I was a total marching band nerd, like for life, and they didn't want to move me from that. And so my dad moved for my senior year. And then after I graduated, I could either stay in Arizona or move to California. And being the music lover that I am, of course, all the great bands are in LA.
Yeah.
I moved to California and then ended up staying there for about 20 years.
That's cool. That's awesome. And when did you meet your husband?
We met probably, I must have been 19 or 20. But we didn't start dating until I think I was 21 or 22. Okay. So we've been, next July, we'll celebrate 20 years of being together.
Oh, that's awesome. And was that in like the music scene time, or how did that happen?
Yeah, a friend of mine was like, hey, my buddy's band is playing at the House of Blues. I've got tickets. Do you want to go? And so I said, absolutely. And so we went and saw his buddy's band, the Piper Downs, and I was like, wow, that guitarist is really cute. And I've always liked musicians, just a thing. And we ended up becoming friends for several years. And then he had a girlfriend, and so once they broke up, I sort of made my move, and we've been together ever since.
That's awesome. And I bring that up because you guys live in a very small space, and we got to talk about that a little bit. So I would love to know, and we're going to get into more details of what you do because I know people have some questions about that. But what was that transition like, and what has that been like for the both of you now?
Yeah, he, I grew up RVing with my family, and so I knew what it was like to be in an RV. He
Hmm.
didn't. And so it was definitely, I sort of planted the seed, and it took
Hmm.
about 5 years. I was spending a lot of time. I had gotten into more knitting for work, and I was spending
Hmm.
a lot of time sitting on my Los Angeles, paying a high mortgage and high gas and high milk and everything, and just like sitting as knitting, watching travel shows and seeing other people's adventures. And I was really struggling with like sitting in my pajamas, not going anywhere. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I can do it from anywhere. So I kind of planted the seed, and it took about 5 years. He had a job and a career that he loved. He was a video game developer, but music into video games. So he loved his career, loved his job. And it took about 5 years to kind of persuade him into leaving his bands in LA. But, you know, a lot of the bands started having kids and moving away and all that. So things sort of started. So the timing just ended up working out right. I told him he could retire at 49 if we left LA. And so he was like totally on board for that. And so now he's retired, and I sometimes second guess this decision when I'm working. I'm like, I didn't think this through, but
Yeah.
we both love it. And you know, we just kind of hit the road, and he loves to travel as long as it's not cold. He hates cold
Yeah.
places, so that he doesn't go to the Arctic with me.
Yeah.
And like a super smooth transition. We just, you know, we get along really well. We love our RV. He does casinos all over the country. I check out yarn stores. We just kind of, you know, just kind of take it each day at a time, but it's going really well so far.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so I know that, like, again, I talked about this in the initial post, and I thought it was so cool because when I looked back, because my husband was like, "How did you find her?" And looking back, I'm not even really sure. I don't know what I was looking at or for on Instagram when one of your posts showed up in my feed, on my explore feed.
Mhm.
And it was a hand knit piece, and I think it was the scarf that you made for Stranger Things, the multiple
Yeah.
scarves that you made for Stranger Things.
Mhm.
And I was like, really? Like, that's because my initial thought was like, wow, you know, I appreciate the fact that people who work in that industry see the value in getting someone to actually make that instead of going for something like fast fashion, like let me just order a bunch of these offline. Um, and so I immediately followed you. Immediately, it was like, we have to chat, you know? So how did that start for you? Because I know a lot of people, that's going to be the big question is how did it start? How did it begin?
Yeah, the sort of initial beginning of it was I had found out that somebody was looking for somebody to do some hand knits. They were a machine knitter, and they were looking to do some hand knits for a movie. And and so I ended up talking to her, and I sort of found out that there was this world of people who, you know, costume designers hire to do projects like this.
Mhm.
And so that was sort of what introduced me to that. And then the censure was there was a conference that came to LA called Fashion Con, I think it was, and it was for people who want to be stylists. Now I
Mhm.
am in no way that, but there was one panel with 4 costume designers on it, and it was $350 for the ticket, which at the time for me was a lot of
Yeah.
business. I didn't have wasn't making a lot of money, and so I'm not like a naturally like my personality is not to go up to people and be like, hey, I'm Krista, I'm a knitter, I would love to work with you, you know, like not my personality.
Yeah.
But I said, if I'm going to spend $350, I'm going to get my business card in each of those 4 people's hands.
Mhm.
And so I went to the conference and sat through a bunch of weird things that I'm like in my jeans and shirt, like looking around going, this is so not my place. But came on, I was just completely enthralled. But I love costume designers. I think that if I had like a fourth career, I would love
Mhm.
costume design. Just it's
Yeah.
so amazing. And so so I was listening to them talk, and it was really interesting. And then when it was over, I put on my big girl panties, and I said, I'm gonna go put my card, and I introduced myself very quickly, gave them my card, and you know, thanked them for coming out, and got it into each of their 4 hands. And then because of my PR background, publicity, I sort of knew how to follow up without being annoying, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I put in my calendar every 3 months. I sent an email and just followed up and just said, hey, I'm Krista, I'm the knitter. I met you at Fashion Con. If you need anything, let me know. And no response, no response. And then almost exactly a year later, one of those, I was going to do it for 1 full year. And so this was like probably my last email. Maybe I was going to do one more. But I sent my emails out and I got an immediate response from Salvador Perez, who is he was at the time the costume designer for the Mindy Project. He also did Hocus Pocus 2. He was the Costume Designers Guild Association president. And I got an email back from him immediately saying, hey, I want to talk to you about the Mindy Project. When can you come to Burbank? And I was like, you tell me when and I'll be there. And so that was sort of my official foot in was I went down to the Burbank studios, met with him, and got assigned 6 pieces to do over the holiday break. And which was super like nerve-wracking because I basically was given pieces from her wardrobe that I had to replicate with knit designs on it.
Yeah.
And, you know, no fittings, 6 pieces, no fittings. So I did those 6 pieces on size 2 needles in about, I think I had close to 2 months.
Wow.
And then I went and met back up with him after the holidays. And that was sort of where that began. And Sal has been like, just such an amazing person to work with and a really great costume designer. And he calls me every once in a while for projects when it fits into his budget and timeline. And then because of his, you know, willingness to put posts out there about me and stuff, other costume designers started following me. And whenever anybody would call him and say, hey, I need a knitter, he'd give him my number. And so that's kind of just where that all started. And it's just, it's completely random. I get calls from people I've never heard of before or never heard from. And so it's just, that's sort of where it all started, is just working with one person who has been amazing to work with.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it really shows the power of being willing to just put yourself out there. Because I feel like that was every time you sent out an email and didn't get a response, the ability for you to go back and say, I'm going to send out one more. Like, I'm going to do this for a certain amount of time. And I feel like that was really smart. And I feel like I feel like there's a lot of people, including myself, in some of those situations where you might have just said, I'm probably annoying them, I'm going to give up, but I mean, if you're annoying them, they're just going to put you in their spam folder. Like that's how I feel, even with my newsletters, if I'm sending newsletters out, I said they can unsubscribe. Like, and Absolutely. If they unsubscribe, it makes room for other people so that I don't have to pay MailChimp because I have too many subscribers. Yeah. So that's super smart.
Yeah. Just this line of, keeping your name in their thoughts, because you never know when something's going to come up. But if they responded back saying, hey, I'm not interested, stop emailing me, I would have probably been like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But, I absolutely, but you're right. I mean, it's so easy to just delete an email if you're not interested. And so, it's amazing how it worked out.
Yeah. So I feel like it's anyone who wants to do anything. Like if there's something that you want to do, you got to put yourself out there. You got to put yourself out there. You got to try, you got to follow up, ask questions. Like, I think that's a big thing. I think it's too easy to kind of just sit and wait when opportunities don't just come knocking on the door most of the time, not unless you put some work in.
Absolutely. And, the other side of it was, I had sort of done enough research to know a little bit about how the business worked, and I wanted to make sure that I had the skills to back up what I was asking them to let me do, There's so much involved in how costume design stuff works, and I needed to make sure that I was a fast knitter and accurate. There's a lot of things. So you just want to make sure, because you mess up once, then, maybe shame on you. And then after that, it's just like, they're just not going to call you anymore. And so I'm confident in my skills as to being able to offer them what I was saying I could.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because you are an expert knitter. I mean, if you look at the stuff that you've had to do, what you've had to work with, like you said, being able to look at something and recreate it. Sometimes I feel like I could do that a little bit with crochet,
But because my focus is beginner friendly patterns, I'm not learning new stitches. You know, I'm sticking with basics and putting that out there. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about that part of your journey of what kind of preparation did you have to do? Did you already feel like you were at an expert knitting level before you even went to? So I'd love to hear a little about that because you're at a high level of detail and expertise there.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing because I love a challenge. When it comes to knitting, I love a challenge. When they send me something and I'm like, ooh, and then I stay up at night and I'm thinking, how would I make that work? And
Mhm.
a lot of it is being fast and being able to rip out and redo. That's
Yeah,
number one because
lots of frogging.
they're on a timeline, and so I have to be able to have that speed. Um, but I think just over the years, I've definitely grown confidence in being able to work off of drawings, work off of inspiration pictures, work off of, they'll send me a piece and say, okay, we want it like this, but we want to change this and, do that. And, there's certain things they want to change. And honestly, it just comes from spending a lot of time thinking about it and
Mhm.
having the speed to be able to test it and then rip out and do it again and still stay within their timeline. And
Yeah.
it's just I that confidence with crochet for sure. Like if somebody sent me like a fully stitch pattern crocheted sweater that needed to be replicated, that would not be my expertise. I'm working on that.
Yeah.
That's what I want to get to that point to be able to do that with crochet. But it's really, knitting is all scaffolding, all scaffold learning. You learn a little bit and then you learn on top of that and you learn on top of that.
Mhm.
I still like to take classes whenever I can and learn new things, learn new techniques. I know brioche has been popular, so a lot more brioche. But it's just a matter of trial and error, and then 20 years of practice.
Yeah. And what kind of things do you like to do to practice and learn? So you said you take some classes. Do you watch YouTube? Do you follow other people's patterns? What are some of the things that you like to do to increase your skill set?
That's a really good question. As a designer, I really try hard not to spend too much time looking at other designers because I
Mhm.
don't want to be subconsciously influenced.
Mhm.
However, I do really like to see what other designers are doing and how they're doing it.
Mhm.
So like if you just sort of think about like who are the giants in the industry, and so if I wanted to like get better at brioche, I probably would go and check out a couple of Stephen West patterns. Like
Mhm.
you sort of who's the expert in those industries, and so I have no problems knitting up their patterns just to learn those stitches, learn
Yep.
those techniques.
Yep.
I don't have the time to do the full project, but if I can at least learn those stitches, I sometimes will go and watch YouTube if there's like a specific technique or something I'm trying to figure
Mhm.
out. I'll watch YouTube, just videos, not anybody specific, just sort of searching it and then
Yep.
seeing how other people are doing it. But I think I'm now at the point where I don't have to do a whole lot of that because I do have enough of those skills to be able to figure that out myself and just sort of test it out. But we're very lucky to have so many amazing, talented designers out there, and so many of them are so willing to share their skills and videos and techniques and answer questions and things like that. And so it's a fine line between not being influenced, but if I need to learn something very specific, I try to find who that person is that does that the best.
Yep. And I feel like that's what I've been trying to do when it comes to new techniques, because a lot of my issues when I was creating designs was learning construction techniques. Like how do I actually put the items together? And so my goal this year for sure is I want to design my own yoke style top down sweater because I've never done that. So I've already purchased two or three yoke style sweaters just to see how they do that. How do you increase to make sure that it's going to fit all the different body types, so it's things like that where I feel like looking at I do it solely to figure out the technique and how to make that work, and then you can take the technique to create your own design, which I think is an interesting way to do that. Um,
Absolutely. Really, really good notes because,
yeah,
you do something and then, oh, that's it. Wait, how did I do that? Yeah.
So we had a couple of questions. I know one question early on was what all movies and TV shows have you worked for? Have you knit for?
Oh man. I've done pieces for The Mindy Project, Lucifer, iCarly, Hocus Pocus 2, Stranger Things,
Couple commercials, yeah.
yeah, some commercials. Annabelle comes home or coming home. Man, I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to just like go
Get
through
out
the
the
pictures.
resume.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, Never Have I Ever. I'm sure there's more, but those are sort of the ones that are popping into my head right now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome though. I mean, that's a great resume. I was so excited. I don't know how I missed the Hocus Pocus 2, your first post. I think I saw one of your latest ones and I was like, wait a second. What? Because at first I was like, oh, she's just a Hocus Pocus fan and she's excited about it. I didn't realize that you'd made her sleeves.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's funny. Yeah, I'm super excited about that because I mean the first movie is, I mean, who doesn't love the first movie and is super excited for the second one? So that again was Salvador Perez, and when he called and was like, "Hey, I want to create these like knit cobweb sleeves for Sarah Jessica Parker's character," and I said, "Well," so we talked about it, and I said, "Well, that would actually probably be crochet. If you want cobwebs, that would be crochet." Oh, okay. Do you crochet? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. You know, and so like, okay, I want them to be sporadic and look, you know, not even and different sizes and stuff. So basically now it's free form crochet, right? It's like, cool. And we need to make like 10 sets of them, which ended up being 13.
Wow.
They all need to be free form crochet and, you know, completely replicated exactly. And so I'm like, okay. So again, note taking, you know, taking really solid notes that I was able to replicate that, and I got a system down and totally like got into the groove. But yeah, and I'm gonna be watching that tonight.
Yeah, challenge accepted though. I feel like that's how you listen, you take it in, then you're like, I got this.
Yeah, absolutely. Challenge accepted. I will never say yes to something where I'm like, I don't think I can do that, because I don't want to, you know, promise and then not deliver. But there, I'm like, okay, that's a challenge. That's going to be a fun one. There was a piece that I did for iCarly, and honestly, I haven't seen. I need to get her to send me a picture. I didn't see how it ended up coming out. And she wanted like a turtleneck, and then more than just a cold shoulder. It was like just sleeves, barely attached under the arm. And so I'm like sitting there trying to figure out how to make that work and how is it going to look on a body. I didn't have a body. You know, this is like a little. So I didn't have a body to try it on. So, you know, there's always these things where I'm like, okay, I'm like looking at the sketches and looking at the sample pictures, and I'm like, all right, challenge accepted. Like you know, if I know I can do it, it might take a little bit. And I have the time, you know, if they're like, we need this tomorrow, then that's a problem. But yeah, I love the challenge.
Well, and I'm interested to know too, because you mentioned that with the scarves that you knit for Stranger Things, that you had to make multiples. Is that the norm? Do you normally have to make, and how many of these items is kind of normal for you to have to make for people?
It's always, every project's different. There's never two film projects that have been the same. Sometimes I have to do multiple. Sometimes I have to do extras and like a sweater and it's slightly different size for a stunt double. There's every project is different, and it depends on what how they're filming it. You know, are they going to be in an action scene? Obviously now we've seen Stranger Things and serious action scenes, and so they needed, because you know, if it got wet or dirty or whatever. So I do find that once costume designers find out like the time and the cost to do something hand knit, it is rare that they'll put that piece into an action scene. You know, sometimes and out they're like, okay, you know, like for the Mindy project, you know, there was like a scene where she falls in the mud, and they're not going to do a hand knit for that. They're going to have something more off the rack, right? And so it is common for me to have to do multiples, but you know, I think I don't remember how many scarves I did, at least 4, I think. It's rare to do that many multiples.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting though. And
Yeah.
somebody asked you,
Yeah.
someone asked about the materials. So they asked, do they purchase the materials for you? So what does that look like when you're working for?
Again, every project is different.
Yes.
Usually, as that's sort of my expertise of, you know, knowing fibers and colors and brands and all that, and what I can actually get in the time frame. You know, like Jimmy Bean's wool really fast. Like I can get it within 2-3 days, whereas you know, We Are Knitters takes like a week. And so I usually will purchase for the Stranger Things scarf. There was a yarn store near where they were filming, and so she sent one of her costume assistants with what they wanted to sort of match, and went to the yarn store, it out and bought it and sent it to me. For Murray's sweater, I was sent a different sweater that they wanted sort of similar, that sort of burgundy little striping. And for that sweater, I was actually at a trade show in Phoenix, and was literally when the text came in, I was sitting with Anzula and Holly from Anzula in her booth. And that text came in, and so we sat there, and she had all of her yarns there and all the colors, and we pulled out and found like the right colors, and then she looked to see how big the spacing of the burgundy needed to be, and that was just like a super fluke. Like I just happened to be sitting right there with her, and we were able to pull out stuff and look at it, and then she custom dyed something for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so every project's different. Some it's like a lower budget and they need it super fast, then I'm running to Joann's or Hobby Lobby, and you know, they have to deal with, you know, what quality, you know, and things like that. And if they want a specific yarn and they're willing to pay for overnight shipping, like it's just every project's different. And it's just a matter of up on what yarns are on the market right now, and how fast can I get them, and how accurate are the colors on the website. And you just start to learn what brands are really good at photographing their stuff, and what shows up and you're like, wow, that is not the brown I saw. So it's all just, experience and a lot of, shipping stuff back sometimes.
Have you had issues at all? Like the color, that makes sense, because I have, I don't know if I've had it specifically happen to myself, because I've never had to have this super specific color. But I've had it happen with weight. I have had a project in mind, had a yarn company sponsor the project, and when they send me the yarn, I'm like, this is not a 5-weight yarn. So I don't know if that's ever happened to you with the weight ever being off, or if you were able to just adjust at that point.
Usually I won't necessarily order a yarn that I'm not familiar with. So I generally know I've bought a lot of yarn in 20 years, like more than I should have. So I to not buy something that I'm not familiar with. Color is usually the biggest issue. So weight really hasn't been an issue, because I'm usually familiar with maybe not that color, but at least I've seen that, touched that yarn.
That's good. And how do you deal with buying yarn being in the RV? So do you have a lot of yarn storage? Do you have somewhere that you keep some of your yarn, or do you only buy for projects?
Oh, I'm sure this is a fun question for my husband to answer.
Yes.
We both have our little spaces. So he has under the bed, the bed pops up, and that's where he can keep his guitar and his musical stuff. And so he's got that area. I have a cubby that's behind the TV, and it's pretty big. It's maybe about 1.5 feet by like maybe 3 feet deep, 2.5 feet deep.
Gotcha.
And so that's sort of my area. It sometimes grows, and it starts to spill out into other places. But the thing about living in an RV is you have to be very selective on what yarn you buy. Now, if a project, like right now, on a project for a fashion designer, and I have to do pillows. So I've got like the pillow form stuffed in the back of our truck, and then I've got some of the finished ones under the bed. So they kind of will sort of spread out and kind of get into his space, but he knows they're going to get shipped soon, and he's really good. He doesn't complain or anything. Just like, oh, well, another bag of yarn, where are you going to put that? And I'm like, no, it's for a project. not going to last long. So
it's going to go in the oven, right?
Yeah.
We're going to put it in the oven, the fridge, you know, microwave. We have space.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have some space, but try not to encroach too much on that stuff. But sometimes it does.
Yeah. So we had a couple more questions specifically from our question box. Can you share about your favorite RV adventure, please, from Otterly Yarn?
Oh man, favorite RV adventure. I yeah, I personally love boondocking, which is dry camping where you're not hooked up, you're not in an RV park, you're on BLM land, which is Bureau of Land Management. And so I love like being out there and watching sunsets and not having anybody around you. So there's been a couple, we haven't done a whole lot lately because we were traveling with my parents and they can't boondock, their RV doesn't go off grid. But we parked outside of Zion National Park and we had like our razor with us, and we had this like big ravine behind us with incredible sunsets. It was a little warm, but I just remember watching those sunsets and like nothing else is around. It's our RV, our truck, our razor, and us, and it was just like stunningly beautiful. So I really like those adventures where it's just like nobody else around. We kind of get that, after 20 years in Los Angeles, being able to hide your home and not have somebody find away from you. That was really amazing. And every RV adventure is an adventure, but I really loved parking outside of Zion. That was amazing.
And where is Zion?
Zion is one of the national parks in Utah, one of the big 5.
Okay.
So yeah, Utah area.
And I've never been to LA. I've only flown into the airport, but even flying into the airport, you can see. I mean, it's just houses. I mean, I couldn't imagine it's such a huge difference going from living somewhere like that to being somewhere like you said, where you've got this true feeling of solidarity and just being able to be alone in the space and enjoy nature. And that sounds awesome.
Yeah. And I lived about 2 to 3 miles from that airport, from LAX airport. So I was right there in the thick of things. There's a sort of a community in the art, just like there's a community in the knitting or in the fiber world. There's a community in the RV world where, you go and you're hooking up your stuff and the neighbor comes over and you start chatting with them. And, they're from South Dakota and they'll tell you, oh, you have to go check this place, or we're leaving tomorrow, but we went here and you got to go there. And so, there's this, every day is something different. You always have something new to go see, and you just meet different people from all over and hear their stories, and they give great recommendations of where to go and what to do and stuff. So it's a very different life, but I love it.
That's awesome. And Mickey just said Zion Sunset Adventure is on my list now.
Yes, absolutely. I recommend in the spring or fall because it gets very hot during the summer, but it's the sunsets are incredible. Oh, and if you do go to Zion, a little tip. I don't know if anybody's into photography or ghost towns or anything like that, but just outside of Zion, on the I think it's Springvale side, there's this really cool little abandoned ghost town with these abandoned houses. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a really cool place. You can go and visit. There's a little graveyard. It's really cool. It's just on the Springvale side, just outside of Zion.
That's cool. That's super cool. She had one more question for you, and that was, what was your favorite piece that you made for Stranger Things?
I would probably say I really enjoyed the Murray sweater. I love working with Anzula yarn. I mean, her yarn is just spectacular. And so that was with, I think, Squishy. It was 3 strands held together. So it was, pretty heavy sweater, but I really enjoyed that piece, I think, because it was the biggest challenge. The actor is almost the same size measurements as my husband, so he was able to try it on, and I love having a body to try it on before I ship it off. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that piece. I liked the challenge of it. It was just enough of a challenge to be interesting and fun, but not stress me out. Yeah. Well, I love hearing holding multiple strands together because that's my jam. Because I wanted to ask you, what's the chunkiest item that you have made so far for the industry? I got a call for a commercial, and they needed 2 sweaters in 3 days. And yeah, and so it was like super bulky, some yarn I got from Hobby Lobby. I don't remember what it was, but it was like a super bulky yarn, and I had to knit 2 sweaters. One of them was a pink sweater that said in Team Girl, which was for a male actor, and then blue sweater with darker blue that said Team Boy, and it was for some sort of a sausage commercial, I think. I ended up seeing it online, but yeah, 2 sweaters, 3 days were called for super bulky yarn.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think I saw a picture of that one. So
yeah,
that's really neat. Yeah. Let's see. I think we had, let's see, Breaking Yarn asks, are you able to sell the designs afterwards?
Breaking Yarn. Hey girl, McKelly. So that is always an interesting question, because people, like when the Murray scarf, they're like, hey, are you going to release the pattern, you know? And the thing is that people have to understand is I don't own the rights to that design. Every different. So like the Mindy project stuff, I was allowed to do. Sal gave me permission to do that. And because those were, it was a collaboration between the 2 of us, but I wasn't contractually obligated to Hulu that they owned that. I've gotten some messages from like cosplay people about the Hocus Pocus, asking if I can, you know, crochet their sleeves for their costume. And I'm in contract with Disney that I'm not allowed to replicate, design, sell anything.
Sounds familiar for Disney.
Yeah. With Stranger Things, I don't own the rights to those, so I can't just go and release the pattern. That's Amy Paris and Stranger Things and Netflix. However, without saying too much, I will say that the pattern will be available eventually. It just has to be done through the right channels with the right sign-offs and completely legal, because I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So every project's different, but Stranger Things project patterns will be coming out. It's just it's going to take time.
And I think there have been some sneaky peek things from different places that have started mentioning some Stranger Things patterns. So I'm interested to see if that continues, if it's different people, or because I know, for instance, Lion Brand has posted a couple of things that they're working with Netflix for some patterns, but haven't released anything yet. I think they're waiting till October 3rd to release some of those things. So it'll be interesting to see how things work. And I've always been super interested, because I know, for instance, who was it? Quicksilver worked with Netflix and released some items that were collaborative pieces for people to purchase that were featured in the TV show. So I feel like I'm learning a lot more about that now than I ever have these days.
And it's interesting because I'm learning a lot about that too. And one of the things that, you know, I sort of want to put out there as well is, if you're going to purchase a design of some sort that is from a movie or TV show or something like that, for example, the Hellfire shirt from Stranger Things, I just please buy it through the Netflix channel, not through somebody who recreated it on Etsy, or, you know, is, you know, take that design from Etsy and selling it on Etsy. You know, these designs are made by artists. And when you take that graphic and you go onto Etsy and you put it onto a shirt and you sell it through Etsy, you are not only that is legally copyright infringement. That's, you know, it's done all the time, unfortunately. But, you know, if you want a Hellfire shirt, like if you go and you buy it through Netflix, that then supports Netflix to then be able to support the costume designers and bring on the costume designers and support the next seasons and things like that, because the costume designer, unfortunately, and the artist don't get money from that, but that support then puts money into the places where then they can get rehired for those projects and those projects can continue. So yeah, I'm learning a lot about that. There's a lot going on in the costume design world right now, especially with women costume designers making less money than the men, and you know, they have a whole thing, Naked Without Us. If you just, you know, look up the hashtag Naked Without Us, the costume designers are are getting, there's a lot going on in that world. And if you're wanting something from a show, just support it directly. Pay that extra $3 or whatever to Netflix and buy that directly rather than going on to Etsy, because it does support the costume designers, and it doesn't infringe on their rights as the designer. So yeah, just my little PSA. I'm a lot about that now too.
I think it's great, and I think it's worth at some point an additional conversation, because I feel like there's this fine line and a conversation to be had for people who create fan art versus taking images, and I don't know the legality of it, because I know there are some situations where you can create fan art and sell it in some ways, but I don't know all of the, you know, what constitutes you know, that versus being copyright versus being inspired by a design versus being you know, it's a big conversation, and I think people are more willing to have the conversation, which is great. I mean, I think there's a lot more knowledge out there, and I think sometimes it is the lack of conversation where people in some cases don't realize what they're doing is wrong.
Absolutely.
Obviously taking a screenshot of an image and sticking it on a t-shirt and selling it is, you should probably know, like, we don't take images off of Google and sell them. But some of the other things, I think there is that question. And I think getting the knowledge and education out there of like what is okay and what's not okay will really help guide people to not find themselves in a hot spot if they thought, you know, oh, it's fine if I do this versus this, you know. So it's interesting, and I think it's a good conversation to continue having.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, people want to support. They want to show how much they love a show, and I love that, and that's amazing. Just, you need to make sure you're supporting the people correctly, because an artist designed, you know, that Hellfire shirt. A person, you know, designed that, and then the costume designer is the one that commissioned that, and it was, you know, her inspiration, idea, and stuff. And so, yeah, it's great to want to support, but make sure you're supporting in the correct way, where you're actually supporting the person who originally did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Okay, we are getting close. We started late, so we can stay on a little bit longer if we need to. But let's see. I know we had a couple more questions for sure. Pebble's own, hello, Ellen, says, how did you come up with what you charge for your services?
Oh, yes. So I actually have a blog on my website that sort of talks a little bit about this, but the short of it is you have to come up with a price that you're going to be okay with at the end of the day. Every costume designer has a budget, and they have to work within that budget, and then you have to work within that budget. So generally what I do is I will guesstimate, work out how much time a piece is going to take, and then I have an hourly rate, and I have a rush hourly rate and a regular hourly rate, and then plus material. And so I will give them a quote of saying, okay, you know, that sweater's going to take X amount of hours. That's this much money. Materials are going to cost this much. So I guesstimate it's going to be between this amount and this amount. And sometimes they're like, okay, cool, no problem. You know, just go ahead and do it. And sometimes they're like, well, my budget is, you know, half that. And so you have to be okay with whatever you decide to take. And so there are times where I haven't been busy, and it's a new costume designer that I've never worked with. And so I will do a project for much less than I would normally do it. And I make it clear. I say, look, just so you know, this isn't like normal for me, but I would really love to work with you. And so I'll make this work. But next time, you know, we just need to have a conversation about costs. I'm not gonna be able to do this again. And so I've done that quite a bit just to work with new costume designers if I'm not busy, and if it's not an unrealistic project. And so every project is different, and it's a matter of working within their budget and working with a number that I'm okay with. So there's no like one exact answer. And my favorite question when costume designers call me, they're like, hey, I want to do a sweater for this film. How much would that be? And I'm like, okay, well, what's the size of the actor? What's our timeline? What's the design? Is it thick? Is it chunky? Is it thin? Is it cables? Is it color work? You know, and so they're like, Oh, there's a lot of questions involved. I'm like, yeah, and it changes the price drastically. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a conversation. Be super clear with the costume designer. I'm always very clear about the expectations. You know, if they want a sweater in 2 days and they only want to pay me $150, I'm just like, I can't do that. Like, that's just not going to happen. So, yeah, every project's different, but I do have a little bit of a blog on my website, explorewithnitsy.com, that I do talk a little bit more in depth into that. But my number one thing, charge what you're worth, but be okay to take less if it allows you to get in the door with somebody new.
Yeah. And I love to, I've read some of your blogs because you really do. I mean, you have broken it down and have quite a few blog posts that really go into detail for people that are looking to get into this kind of work. And I love that you said not only charge what you're worth, but know your skill set. Don't over promise, you know, that you can do something and then realize, oh shoot, like this isn't going to happen, you know? So I think that's extremely important to know when you see what they're asking for, if you can actually accomplish it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Huge bummer. It's only happened once where I was not able to deliver because there was a miscommunication about timeline. And I've never heard from that costume designer again. And it's unfortunate, but you know, you learn from your mistakes and you move on and you don't make that mistake again.
Yeah. Breaking Yarn said, you two switched hair color from the promotion post. I love it.
We did.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't remember if you had pink or not, and I hadn't been pink for a minute. So and I wanted to do a picture of both of us with pink hair, but I couldn't find, you know, I have to line up the graphic, and I was like, this isn't working. This one looks good, so we're gonna go with it. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, do I still have you? I think it just it caught back up. I had one more question. And that was, what is your favorite weight of yarn to work with?
Oh, excellent question. It depends on the season, because I love like a good, like I love Magnum or with the Malabrigo Rasta. I love good bulk. But not in the winter or not in the summer and not for big projects. Like I had to knit an entire bean bag, like a full size, like bean bag, cover out of Magnum. I mean, it took like, balls of that. It was heavy and hot and ridiculous and really heavy. So I love, like, if it's a hat, I love a good hand dyed, chunky, but if I'm knitting something just like for pleasure or whatever, I actually really like a DK, hand-dyed DK, not really much bigger than a worsted, you know, sort of in that DK sport worsted range. But at the end of the day, I like hand-dyed pretty much more, like in any weight, more than anything. I love working with hand-dyed yarns.
And is it usually 100% wool? What, do you have a fiber preference?
Merino, yeah. I love washable merino. Yeah, it dyes so beautifully, and it's soft and it's squishy. Yeah, 100% merino. That's my jam right there.
It's got the squish. I always think like that that audio with the corn, you know, and it says it's got the juice, and I'm like, I need to do one where it's got the squish instead of it's got the juice. Well, like I said, I didn't want to keep you over time, and I'm so sorry again that I was late today. It has just been quite a week, but I think we got through all the questions that we had in the question box. And we'll probably have to do a follow-up because I think that would be a really cool conversation to have with you about what you've learned working in the industry when it comes to things like designs and copyright, and because that's a conversation that I think is difficult to have because legally it can be it can feel overwhelming for people to figure out, you know, what can I and can't I do, and I think that would be interesting to have another conversation about that. But I'm just so thankful that you were able to come on and take a break from your traveling to join us for an hour, and Where are you headed to next?
So we're going to be parked in Virginia. It's where we are right now for about 3 months. And
Okay.
then I have trips. I leave the 11th, I think, and I'm going up and shooting the fall colors, doing some photography with the fall colors.
Ooh, nice.
And then middle of November, I leave to go to my 7th continent for the year, to Australia.
That's exciting.
Yeah, checking that one off the list. So that'll be
You haven't been to Australia yet? Is that?
I've been to Australia before, but
Okay.
this 7th continent in 2022. I'll have hit all 7 in 2022. So it wasn't something that, like, all the other 6 continents were all planned and pushed because of COVID. But I was like looking at it, and I was like, looked at my husband, and I'm like, I'm going to be in 6 of the 7 continents this year. But like, would it be crazy if I like just did a trip to Australia to check out the 7th? And the friend that I'm going with, in 6 continents together. So we're going to go do the 7th together and just check it off all in 1 year.
Exciting. That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I hope that you stay safe and you have a great trip, and we will keep in touch, because I think it'd be awesome to do a follow-up with you. This was a great chat. I feel like everybody enjoyed it, and thank you to everyone who joined in live. If you joined in late, you can watch this anytime, the replay on my Instagram. It should be uploaded in just a few minutes. And then I also have a playlist on my YouTube channel of all of these episodes. I think this is episode 31. So like getting on down the line with these. So if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to get to know even more makers, that is an option. You can check it out there. This one should be uploaded within 2 to 3 hours, usually, if not by the end of the day, added to that playlist as well. So again, thank you guys for joining in. Thank you so much for coming on. This was an awesome conversation. And like I said, I hope that you have a great weekend and that your next trip is amazing. And we'll be watching for pictures of fall colors in Australia.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Again, I apologize for the darkness. It's finally stopped raining outside. That's good.
Great.
So great chatting with you. And anybody, if you have questions or whatever, you want to reach out to me, just drop me a message. I am really good about answering my messages. And yeah, I want to encourage people to craft whatever, as much as they can, because it has saved me, and I know it saved a lot of other people. So yeah, good times.
Awesome.
Let's make it all together, and we got to support community.
Yes, community. Make me friends. All right, well, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much. Bye.